Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. And welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest chat with friends. You may have heard a lot from me this past week. I've had a very, very busy week talking about different cultural aspects to Euro games and abstract puzzle games earlier in the week. Yesterday, if you tuned into the feed or my channel, I did a whole video kind of explaining cultural consultancy, clearing up misconceptions, all that kind of thing. We're moving the conversation forward today, and this is the spirit in which this man is appearing on my podcast. He is the designer of the #1 Game and Board Game Geek, a multi-award winning. I know he loves when I talk about that. And the designer of the upcoming very, very big and anticipated game Frosthaven, which we'll get into all about today. He is Isaac Childres. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. So, like I said, the spirit of this conversation is continuing the conversation. A conversation which started a week ago as we were recording this, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Yep. Last Friday,
which is I think you do updates every other Friday, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the last week's Friday update, Isaac decided to kind of change course a little bit. Usually it's a lot about mechanisms and scenario design and all that kind of thing. This time it was about narrative. And the title of the blog, Update 80, was Getting the Narrative Right. So if you listen to this channel, we've had a lot to say, but we'll kind of go over the ground just in case people are tuning in for the first time. So if I can, let's just start off. Let's say somebody is just tuning in. This is their first episode. Let's start with update number 80 and what you tried to accomplish with update number 80.
Sure. Yeah. So, the point of update number 80, and the reason I put it out was, because because a lot of people will question like, oh, why did you put it out? You're just like trying to get a pat on the back or whatever. But yeah, like the reason that I posted that because I thought it was just an important conversation to have, and in some senses it was bigger than Frosthaven. I did kind of have an agenda for putting it out, just in the sense that like I felt like we as a community should be talking about it, and it was an important aspect of Frosthaven that we were working on at the moment. So I felt like it was appropriate to also talk about it in that space of the updates. But yeah, the update was about cultural consultancy, hiring on a cultural consultant to go through our narrative, which is huge. I mean, there's a lot of narrative to go through.
It's a lot of years, man. This is what, 20, when did you start working on Gloomhaven? Early 2010s. I know that.
Gloomhaven, I started working on it, I guess in 2015, like the start of 2015. So
we're talking 6 years of narrative, and then all of the different scenarios and the different races and different other people contributing. You had expansions that were designed by whole other people that brought lore in, and so it's a lot of stuff that we're going over.
Yeah, now we're branching off into comic books and other things, and so
video game.
Yeah, video game. And so initially, like, the project is to just work on the narrative of Frosthaven, because that's obviously like what's important right now, and that's what's coming out. But yeah, once that's done, we also want to go back to other things. It's funny, like, I just watched your video where you're talking about Frosthaven by
which
yourself.
Was done independent, by the way. Isaac did not ask me to do that video. I was not conversating anyway. It's just a conversation that I enjoy having. So Isaac and I speak on some level, so this is just from me. So Isaac, I'm actually curious as to what Isaac thought, but you can go ahead.
But yeah, you had mentioned the website, where it sort of gives you a description of all the races, and I had totally forgotten that was up there. So you had mentioned that in Reddit, and I was like, oh gosh, we need to change that too. So there's all this lore and information in all these different places that we'd like to go back and revise and make sure that we get right. With the idea of the way I like to phrase it is just like not causing harm with the narrative, and that's kind of like a broad way to look at it. But it's just like we're not um, perpetuating these stereotypes that exist in our real world of how these, I guess racial essentialism is an important part of that. Where these here are these races, or whatever you want to call them, species, and they have these specific traits. Like all of this type of species like has this trait
Everywhere, no matter where they're born, no matter what their story is, no matter who raised them, they could have been kidnapped by, humans and raised in a wizard tower. The Inox are going to have some sort of intelligence block, and it doesn't matter, right? It just that's what racial essentialism is. And I went over all that in the video, and it seems like we're on the same page there.
Yeah, and so so that's part of it. Just kind of fixing the races and just making like all of their cultures more interesting, right? Because that's part of the process. If you can't say like all Inox are stubborn, and stupid or whatever, like you have to actually go in and flesh out what their actual culture is. And so that's part of the process as well. So like it's not just doing the work of not causing harm, but it's also going through and enriching the narrative and enriching the story as well. And then also like part of not causing harm is just like not using harmful terms that have just like a lot of baggage in the real world, just like words like savage and stuff like that, where they're just like, it's been used so often in our real world to put down a specific culture, that just when it's used even in a fantasy setting, like that still can trigger things in people and cause harm, because they have experience with that word in the real world. And so there's just there are always like other synonyms to use that are very easy to just do like a find and replace on. And so, but that's part of the process as well.
Yeah. So not going to get into too much because, and I want to move past the blog, right? I mean, I did a whole video on it. You've talked about it a lot. You released a statement on Twitter, addressing a certain particular type of it. And I'll just leave that statement for Twitter in terms of people who are felt some type of way about the way the blog was written. That statement is on Twitter and also addressed it in the video. So we're just going to put that aside for now. What I would like to know from you is, I mean, I think people wonder about motivation. Like why now? Why are you doing this? I think there's this idea that, like you said before, like you put out the video to get a pat on the back, or like people hire cultural consultants in order to kind of like satisfy the SJW crowd. My poor friend Mendez being called a grifter, and why are you paying for him and everything? Stuff that I clearly don't agree with, but I think behind all that is this kind of like questioning of the motivation. Like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want to, or are you doing this because you feel like you have to?
Well, yeah, I'm doing it because I want to.
100%. There's no force. There's no pleasing. Like you can say that to all the Gloomhaven fans. I'm doing this because I want to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in the game design process, in the process of producing this thing, to just make sure that your audience is going to be happy with it and is not going to be harmed by it, like unintentionally otherwise, by something that I did because I was ignorant, right? I mean, like I don't know everything. I don't know all the ways in which I can harm people through my language, and that's why you hire a professional. I really can't like stress this enough, right? Like Mendez is a professional. It's like people talk about how, whoa, he's got his own biases and whatnot, but it's like, yeah, we all have our own biases, but like his job is to do this, is to look at these narratives and identify what's going to cause harm, and like that's his job. I mean, just like if I were a journalist, I'll have my own biases, but like when I sit down and write a news story, ideally like those biases aren't going to come out. So anyway, that's one of the things that like kind of rankles me. And when I see some comments about that. And also just, the idea that like he's a grifter, right? And it's like, well, he only gets paid if he finds problems. It's like, well, you could say the same about an editor. So are you like asking me not to hire an editor either? And so,
Right.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But the idea being that you're not doing this out of any sense of pressure, social pressure, desire to please a constituency. Like in your heart, you really feel like this is the best direction for your work of art.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I think so two things that the people want to know, right? And things I can't answer because and to be, totally transparent, I have not received any monetary compensation. I'm, doing this because I'm interested and we, our interests realign. So I don't know. I'm not connected to the Frosthaven project. So I actually don't know the answer to these two particular questions. And I think these are the things that people want to know. Simple one first. I put on my hazmat suit and I went in the comments of the blog. One thing I did notice though is like, okay, will this affect fulfillment? Will this affect when I get my game? Are you re-engineering the game to, and will that delay things because things have already been delayed enough because of COVID, because of different reasons? So, what can you tell the people on that level?
Sure. Yeah. And I tried to like mention this in the update, but the update was long and I think it kind of got a little lost for a lot of people. And that's understandable. So essentially like there is quite a bit left to do with the game, mostly in terms of like graphical stuff. So there's a lot of graphic design and also just like an editing process that needs to happen as well. And so there are these things that are still ongoing. And if you're talking about somebody coming in and also like essentially going through his own editing process, right? Like reading through the narrative, identifying problems, and then we sort of collaboratively fix them. That's something that can happen in parallel. It's not like we have to put all this other stuff on hold while we do this.
It's not like the printer was like this with the button pressing send.
Right.
And it's like, wait, we have to do everything. There's still a lot that has to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and we're all getting close to finishing that. But I mean, we're also getting close to like finishing with the cultural consulting process as well. So yeah, because I mean, this has been ongoing for the past month or two now. And like I described before, right? I mean, he's going through, he's identifying problems, we're fixing them. It's not like completely overhauling the narrative, right? It's not like we have to rewrite everything that's already been written. It's just an editing process. We go through and we make small changes here and there, and that mostly fixes everything. I mean, you might have to do some heavier rewrites in some sections, but it's not a lot of work.
Actually pretty helpful to think of it as cultural editing. Editing never really delays things a million years unless it's broken. And Gloomhaven / Frosthaven is not broken narratively. Is that fair?
Right. No, it's not.
Okay. And then the next one is will Frosthaven, I keep on confusing the two. I don't, do you do that? Do you confuse your babies?
No, not so much. I mean, Frosthaven is so prominent at this point. Like it's just dominated my brain for so long. Sometimes I forget about my other baby, but
he's grown.
Yeah.
He's or she, I don't even know if it's he or she, but out in the world. Anyway, so Frosthaven, will Frosthaven still be cool? So I mean, in the sense that like, okay, you say the word safe, and a lot of people made this point. It's like, this is a violent game. I mean, we're talking about some, you have gnarly moral choices. You have situations where you have to like make real sacrifice, and you might even have to kill an innocent person. You have to make a judgment call about somebody on the road and hack them down. And so like, it sounds weird to people to think of like making a violent game safe. So does the process of safety mean that Frosting will be less violent?
The simple answer is no. So I think it's just important to focus on like what a player is opting into, right, when they sit down and play the game. This is a dungeon crawler. We've all got weapons. These are all the monsters. The goal is like, go through this dungeon, kill all these things. And that's kind of like the very, high level premise that if somebody says, do you want to play Gloomhaven or Frosthaven? There, I guess I confused them.
I take responsibility for that. That was me.
This is what it's about. Like, that's what they're going to get, and that's what they're going to sit down and play. And so yeah, there's a certain crowd that doesn't like that, right? That is never going to get into, that level of violence. It might be because, for any number of reasons. Yeah. So you're going to sit down and you're going to play that. And you understand the parameters of the world you're in. You're there to kill things. And that's absolutely not going to change. And there's still going to be like difficult moral decisions that you need to make through the event cards and all the scenarios and things like that. Branching paths. You can deal with these threats to Frosthaven in different ways, depending on your choices. And all that's great, but it's just, this process specifically is about, when you've opted into this and you sit down and play it, you don't want to suddenly get blindsided by, looking at the back of your character mat and it's saying this race is animalistic and savage but also, but there's some sort of connotations like, this real race, or what I'm saying, like this real culture that that's just gonna like take you out of the game, right, and just like blindside you, and like, I didn't opt into this.
Like I gave an example in my video about vermlings, right?
Yeah.
And so vermlings, for me as a Puerto Rican person who resonates with native cultures, because that's kind of, I trace roots there. Vermlings are very obviously drawn from native kind of cultures and stereotypes. Then it's like, okay, now it's like, wow, good, I can play something that resonates with my culture, but they're animalistic and savage. And if I play one, then I'm playing like an exception to a rule. And, some people won't care. And there's a lot of people that'll miss that entirely. And Isaac, right? You missed it entirely. It's like,
Yeah,
and that's fine. That's what multiple eyes are for, really is. So then being just aware of that. And so like, if you think about it, okay, the front of your mat won't change. The map won't change. Maybe stuff on the back of the mat will be altered, but nothing on the front of the mat, your cards, your gear, the little blood spatters that appear on the little on the mat tiles and everything. That'll all be there.
And also, it's just important to emphasize like the back of your mat will be better. Like, it'll be changed, but it'll be better. It'll give you a clear concept of what this group of people is and what they do, and why it's important, and like why it's important to the game, without using any sort of like racial essentialism shortcuts.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, so that's kind of high level stuff. And I think that kind of is where the blog ends. Right. And so now let's move forward. Because I know you have further updates, and I know you want to like use those further updates to kind of drill down a little bit more on what you're doing and what you're thinking. So, I have to be careful with designers, people, publishers. You keep things close to the chest. You don't want to reveal too much. But I guess like use this opportunity as much as you can to get like, what are we thinking here? Tell me a little bit more about which races you're thinking of. What's something that's like maybe getting you really excited? Oh wow, the cultural consultant gave me this idea. We're going to move forward here, so maybe we can explore something and just try to really fill in what you're doing.
Yeah. So for instance, the Inox are also kind of a species that in Gloomhaven very much like hewed closely to like native cultures. Also, we're just these are the primitive races that live in the forests, and if you encounter them, they'll murder you and all your children or whatever. And so it's definitely something we wanted to pull back away from, or at least like establish that that group of people like still has a culture, and maybe that culture includes like killing all intruders, but also the fact that like not all Inox are like that. That there's different cultures within this group. But anyway,
Yeah. I mean,
so
I think like that's a good way to think about the changes. So like the way I put it in my video was we're not going to get rid of racial hatred. Like
right,
if someone wants to play I hate all whoever, then you can go right ahead and play that. As a matter of fact, that kind of brings resonance to the world and just you have fun. But like it's in the old Gloomhaven mind from that person was right. I hate Vermillions because Vermillions are this. Well, that person was right because that Vermillions really are this, except for those
yeah,
exceptions. And now we're complicating that, or at least the fiction is complicating that. Where it's like if someone says all Inox are blank, it's like, well, there might be right, but here is a here's a group of exceptions. Here is a whole society. Here are laws. Like, I mean, just to kind of drill down on the Native American thing, like we talk about, the Iroquois. Now, not very well known that like our constitution was partly stemmed from a constitution made by the Iroquois and a couple of centuries earlier. They had democracy, they had meetings, they had laws, and and it was a very kind of like stable society. They weren't savages. That's a terrible name for that. And that's how they were seen. But you look at the
yeah,
Iroquois society, you look at the tribes down in the South before they were displaced. They had government, they had culture, they had songs, they had rites of passage. I remember, I think I saw something about like different rites of passage and everything, things that real societies have, and they can be nasty as long as they have these kind of elements that flesh out the picture.
yeah, definitely.
So a little bit more about so the Inox. What were some of the things? Because I know because they hew a little bit close to orcs, and I know that's very close to Menez's heart. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
putting a little bit more flavor into that. So, is there something that was a little change that was got you a little bit excited?
Yeah. So just like working on the back of the character mat for the Drifter, which is the Inox class in Frosthaven. And even like before we brought Mendez on, I was kind of like trying to do my own cultural consulting, just like going through text and making sure, things weren't like super offensive, but I still didn't like fully understand the concepts, until we started talking to him. But so yeah, like this is even after like my pass of trying to make it better, but it still starts off with like Inox are proud and stubborn. And obviously that's just like what we've already talked about, racial essentialism. And so, yeah, we wanted to move away from that. And
So what is the Drifter? Like, tell us a little bit about, because the Drifter automatically, when I hear that name, like, I don't know the mechanism, and maybe you could share a little bit about that, but like the name just sounds like I am leaving my culture, and like I'm kind of like going off and being an individual. Maybe it is a rite of passage, or maybe it is just like seeking something else.
Yeah, and I guess that was probably the coolest part, the most exciting part about this process. That's probably the part I should just talk about instead of like going through like a bullet point list.
Sure.
But but yeah, essentially like the Drifter itself, like that name, like wasn't even the first name that we had assigned that class. Like it was originally called the Juggernaut, but it just didn't feel like juggernauty enough, like he wasn't like running through walls, with a steel helmet and whatnot. And so I kind of, I wanted to, there was like the survivalist vibe to him. So we eventually settled on the name Drifter instead. But it was always, yeah, just like a name that I just kind of like tacked on and didn't really think about too much. But then in the cultural consulting process, James like highlights this. And he's like, why is this guy called the Drifter? Like the exact same question you just asked. Like what makes him a drifter? Like what makes an Inox drifter different from like a human drifter? And just like asking those questions, forces you to start to think about it and like, go deeper into the lore and like go deeper into that culture and like, okay, well, like what would be the reasons like why an Inox would leave his leave his village or leave his nation behind and go work on his own. And so we ended up like developing this whole backstory or like this, this cultural touchstone for the Inox clans of the Great Grove, which is kind of this big forest in sort of the middle of the continent, where like it's a practice of theirs to kind of like send off their young warriors to like just go off into the wilderness by yourself for a year and just like do your thing and like find out like what you're passionate about, and some of them will return stronger and like knowing what they want to do with their lives and how they want to help their village. Some will end up going off into human towns, and just like it's more adopting more of like the human city life, and just taking jobs through that. And then others will kind of just like fall in love with the wilderness and just like just be in the wilderness by themselves, and like that's what they want to do. And so those are the Inox who become the drifters. And so that whole element, all those elements of lore were sort of developed by this process of just like just Mendez asking like a simple question of just like what makes an Inox drifter different from a human drifter. So I think that was a really cool process.
Were there instances where changes in the back of the mat did change what was on the front of the mat? Were there instances where the lore changes actually influence mechanisms, where it's like, let me go back and redesign this, rethink this, make it cooler, or kind of tweak it? Was that a thing, or are the mechanisms at this point fairly set?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, the only thing, there was almost a change. But
you hear that, people? It's not changing. The mechanisms are fine. You're fine. It's very
well, it was just one of the scenarios. I was because I can't really go into specifics because
right.
It's and like what you were doing, like the path you were going on was like, I don't know, made me like a little uneasy. It kind of like bordered on genocide in a way that was kind of uncomfortable. And I thought that like, so we eventually changed the narrative around that. Just because it wasn't comfortable for me. But and I thought like changing the narrative might end up leading to like kind of adjusting the mechanics of one of the specific scenarios like in that quest line. But the way that I had changed the narrative ended up that not needing to happen. So like, nothing actually changed, but like it almost changed.
I mean, for me, it's like, oh, because I'm still theme first. It's like, oh man, I love when that happens. But I think a lot of people back with the sense that they're going to get a gnarly mechanical hand management experience, and they're still like that. You're still getting that, people. That's kind of maybe the most reassuring thing that someone out there could hear.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I guess we can start to ask some kind of bigger picture questions, and I'm curious about this. So let's turn away from Frosthaven just for unless you have another thing that you want to bring up about Frosthaven. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we missed, or are we good?
Oh yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. So then I remember. Okay, so you have Gloomhaven, right? And then you had, I think you announced Frosthaven and Jaws of the Lion at the same con. Is that fair?
It was a little bit apart. I announced Jaws of the Lion at Shucks, which was like in September, October, and then I announced Frosthaven at PAX, which was in December.
The PAX so I was at, everybody was wearing the stupid horns.
Yeah.
Stupid paper horns that are like Burger King crowns. It's like, oh man, you gotta be kidding me. So it was very, very close, right? Because I remember, there was a lot of excitement for Jaws and everything. So Jaws hit. I mean, again, big success, and definitely kudos to you. But I think at one point, now it's up for awards, and like there are certain, places where it didn't quite get the recognition because of backwards compatibility. Right, they integrate, they come together, and it's like they're kind of the same system. Am I really getting something different? So I disqualify for an award, and you had a tweet about that. You were very torn.
Yeah, so you're very torn with that Twitter rant. Okay.
Maybe we don't have to, but it's like I was very interested
we can
in
talk
that.
about it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I just like post things on Twitter because it's what I'm thinking about. Like the last thing I wanted to do, like with that series of tweets, was like, I don't know, make it think like I was making a big deal about it. Like I was just, it was just something I was thinking about. Like this is interesting. You know, the like what exactly delineates like a new product from, you know, just an expansion or a reimagining of an existing product, you know. And so that like line and where that line was just kind of interesting to me, and that's kind of what I was getting at with the tweets.
Hmm. And so, I
um
mean, we did it. We did a top 100, and we had to figure out people who voted for both of them. I will admit, I put them together because when you separate them out, they tend to kind of steal votes from each other. So it's like,
sure.
all right, yeah, I'll just throw them together. But also, it is the backwards compatibility issues. Like I can take my Vermling Mind Thief, and I can slap them in this other product and whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one way of cutting the slice. That is not the only way, right? Because that's just a product decision that you made. To like, I want everybody to play in the same system, so I'm gonna make that
Yeah.
happen. Um, Another
Yeah,
way.
just so, yeah, if you got Gloomhaven, like there's still a reason to go get this new product,
Mhm,
you know, because you can, yeah, move things back and forth between them, which I think is interesting.
mhm. So then that becomes a thing that where people cleave it. Another one is it's almost like a kind of a value judgment of like, okay, how much new work went into this,
Yeah.
right? So like it's almost like people like that are on these award shows or do whatever, they kind of like look at a product and say, okay, so Pandemic Legacy is clearly like a year and a half of work extra to get this thing, even though it's built on basic Pandemic, right? So Pandemic Legacy, here you go, have more recognition for its own thing. Jaws of the Lion, it's like, okay, work kind of the same. If I know how to play Gloomhaven, I can play Jaws of the Lion very, very easily. How much extra work could have really gone into this? So was that part of the kind of agita? Did you feel like, by people excluding Jaws of the Lion with some certain awards, it was like a recognition that, maybe you didn't work that hard on it, or like, you, I don't know. Did you feel that a little bit?
Yeah, maybe that might have been part of it. And I think, um, yeah, it's just my company has grown so much like since we put Gloomhaven out. And yeah, Jaws of the Lion was like a labor of love, like not just for me, but for everyone else involved. Um, and and that was a large part of what it was about. It was just like, yeah, all these people like put a lot of effort into this, and yeah, and the mechanical system was the same, but pretty much everything outside of that was completely new. And it was just it was a lot of work, like taking this other game and distilling it down, like everything that was good about it into
Hmm.
this smaller product.
Oh, that's so
um,
fascinating. Like the work, it was a lot of work, but the work was editing almost. The work was like unworking, so to speak, and getting it down to a smaller package. That's interesting.
yeah, that was some of it. And then also like just a lot of effort went into that how to play book and those first 5 scenarios, and just how to like perfectly onboard somebody who's not familiar with this type of game at all, to put them through a series of scenarios and get them to the point where they're like comfortable playing Gloomhaven, which is not, it's a complicated game. It's not easy to play. And and so that was a big part of it as well. Yeah, just a lot of work going into that. And so yeah, I mean, I felt it was all the work that was put into it was worthy of recognition. But I also like understand that other people have other opinions, and they're the ones making the awards, and that's totally cool.
Mhm.
But I was just wanted to talk about
Process.
it.
There was nothing. You weren't advocating for anything. It's just kind of like, oh, I got some feels over here, and we should encourage that. We should encourage people who have the feels to just work it out, process, and it's all good at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
It's all good. And so Frosthaven, could that encounter some of the same issues?
I don't think it will. because I mean, yes, again, like the mechanical system is the same, but there's also like a lot more on top of it. You know, the in between scenario aspects of the game are significantly enhanced, to the point where, like, yeah, I don't think you could point at Gloomhaven and Frosthaven and say they're the same game. And then, I mean, obviously, you know, like I was telling you before, you know, it's been like so much more work than Jaws of the Lion was as well. Like, you know, the past, I mean, we've been working on it like consistently for like the last year and a half, but like I've also been working on it, you know, essentially like for the last 4 years in one way or the other. And it will show in just the amount of content and the amount of, yeah, just like new stuff in the box. Like, yeah,
That was
I
the big
don't
thing
think
that got
anybody could
people
say it's the same
excited.
product.
I remember when I was at that PAX, that was the thing that got people excited, was like the extra stuff, like the town building and the crafting, and like, are you happy with where that's at?
Oh yeah, I mean, I hope I would be, given that, yeah, it's all pretty much set in stone at this point, and yeah, we're
That's all set in
just
stone.
again
Yep.
like doing graphical stuff to finish it up.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I'm very happy with where everything is at. Like, I think it's gonna be really cool. Yeah, that like I said, like that in between scenario stuff, like, is going to be more involved, and I think, I don't know, there may be like some crowd who sees that as like a detriment, you know, like because they just want to do the dungeon crawl, they just want to go from one dungeon crawl to the next. But I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in between scenarios now, and so I think overall, like, it's definitely going to be an improvement.
You already had that, people. You already had it. Give us our fun.
Yeah.
All right. So then I can't stand asking this question, but that's the question that's on the mind. Do you know what I'm going to ask? But I know the people want to know it. What do people want to know more than anything else? What's probably the question you get more than anything else about this product? When am I going to get it?
Yeah, when am I going to get it? Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
You don't have to. It's just, I don't know if you have any kind of like a thing
Well,
that you have in mind.
so yeah, I mean, we are going to address this more in
Okay,
the next update. So the update that's coming in a week.
cool.
But yeah, I mean, from the last update where we talked about, you know, the timeline, I don't think it's been pushed back considerably. And I think, yeah, I think our timeline of getting it out to people in the October-November timeframe is still reasonable. I mean, that's also dependent on other issues that we don't really have control of. You know, like the shipping situation just across the world is kind of a nightmare right now, and we're just kind of hoping that it improves by the time we're actually shipping. But we'll see whether that happens or not. It's like everything is backed up. There's not enough containers anywhere. It's a whole thing. But yeah. So I mean, ideally at this point, like, yeah, we're still shooting for that October-November timeframe, and yeah, that's ideally when people will get it.
Very cool.
Celebrate.
Can't wait. Can't
And
wait.
marvel at the gigantic size of the box.
Is it,
And
how
all
much
the
bigger is it than the Gloomhaven box?
let's see. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Like, you know, it's the same like length and width, but it's going to be deeper. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head like how much deeper, but, you know, I don't know, probably at least a couple inches.
'Cause I remember it was a big thing where people would like take pictures with their pets inside the
Yeah,
Gloomhaven
in the
box.
box. Yeah.
So like, am I gonna get a bigger pet to be?
Well, maybe. Like I said, like the length and width are still the same. So,
Okay.
so yeah, you still probably have difficulty fitting a bigger pet in there, but a taller pet you could still fit in.
There you go. All right. So this was Isaac Childress. This was we're continuing conversations, right? And that's again, I'll end where I began. which is that this is the spirit of this episode. There's no like conclusion. There's no beginning to it, no end to it. It is very open. Isaac answers his email. Like, believe me, goes through his email all the time. If you want to reach out to him directly, he has invited that, in terms of please be respectful. Good faith conversations. I think that Isaac is open to that. And so that's what's happening. Like, you're going to do an update in the Friday, just like every other update, opening conversations and talking about the cultural stuff. But eventually, like, the cultural stuff is going to end. It's coming, it's clocking down, and there's going to be other conversations to come.
Yep, we have lots of different conversations to have in the future as well.
All right, thank you.
So yeah, next week, we'll be talking about the timeline, but also I want to show people the new character sheets and all the stuff that comes along with that, which is really exciting. But anyway.
Isaac Childres, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great talk.
All right. If you can change your mind, you can change the world. So until next time, lay everybody.